You're sitting on the porch of your family's lakeside cabin. The wood is old but sturdy, carrying the smell of cedar and sun-baked pine. A glass of iced tea sweats in your hand, and the last streaks of sunlight spill across the water like melted gold. The crickets have started their nighttime song. Cicadas buzz deeper in the woods. And for a moment, the world feels perfectly at peace. But then, tires crunch on gravel. A shadow cuts across the path, and a voice, sharp as broken glass, shatters the quiet. "Excuse me, you can't be here. This property belongs to the Homeowners Association." That was the moment everything changed for Derek Marshall. Derek turned his head slowly, lowering his glass to the porch railing. He'd grown up visiting this cabin, his grandfather's pride and joy, the place where summer stretched long and sweet, where fish fries brought family together, where he learned how to swim and how to stand tall. To him, this cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was history. And yet, standing in front of him was a woman who looked at him like a trespasser. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s. Straight blonde bob that didn't dare move in the evening breeze. Oversized sunglasses she didn't need at dusk, and a clipboard tucked under her arm like a badge of authority. She was the kind of person who thrived on rules, the type who never smiled at neighbors, but always had something to say about their trash cans being out too long. Around here, people called her one thing behind closed doors: Karen. Derek sat forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice was calm, steady. "Can I help you with something?" "You most certainly can," she said, striding closer. Her heels clicked against the gravel like a ticking clock. "You can pack up your things and leave. This cabin isn't supposed to be occupied. Whole regulations forbid unregistered tenants." Derek blinked. Tenants? That word stung. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I'm not a tenant. This is my family's cabin. We've been here for generations." Her mouth tightened into a thin line. "No, this lot is under our whole jurisdiction. We don't allow squatters. Either you leave voluntarily, or—" She raised her phone high, like she was on stage. "I'll call the police." The air around them seemed to still. The lake, the trees, even the insects fell into a strange hush. And just like that, the peace Derek had come here for was gone. But what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that Derek wasn't just some man sneaking into a lakeside cabin. His family had owned this land long before her hope even existed. His grandfather, Henry Marshall, had bought over 600 acres back in the 1950s. Acres no one else wanted. Acres people thought were worthless. Henry worked the land, cared for it, carved out space where others saw nothing but swamp and scrub. And over time, developers came calling. Deals were made. Parcels were leased. Some sold. But the deeds, the mineral rights, the water rights, all of it still tied back to the Marshall family trust. Derek wasn't just at his grandfather's cabin. He was sitting on land his family still owned. Land beneath every gleaming lakefront home in this county. And Karen had no clue. "Ma'am," Derek repeated, his tone firmer now. "I'm not leaving. I have every right to be here." Her face flushed red. "You people always think you can bend the rules," she snapped. "I don't care what story you've cooked up. This neighborhood is protected. I'm calling 911 right now." She jabbed at her phone, her voice rising with each word. "Hello, yes. I need to report a suspicious male trespassing at a private cabin. He's refusing to leave. He's hostile. Yes, I feel threatened." Derek didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't even take his hands off the armrests. Still, hearing those words, hostile, threatened, sent a chill through his chest. He'd heard them before. Too many black men had, and he knew how quickly those words could turn deadly. Across the lake, porch lights flicked on. Curtains twitched. Neighbors stepped outside, curiosity drawing them closer. What had started as one woman's outrage was now a spectacle. Karen paced back and forth, speaking louder than necessary. "Yes, officer, he's still here. No, he won't leave. I don't know what he's capable of." Derek shut his eyes for a moment. breathing deep, remembering his grandfather's voice. One day, Henry had warned, sitting on this same porch decades ago, they'll try to tell you this land ain't yours. They'll look you in the eye and call you a trespasser. Don't you bow. Don't you run. Stand tall, son. This land remembers who worked it. And so, Derek stood tall. 10 minutes later, the faint wail of sirens carried across the water. Blue and red lights flickered through the trees. Gravel crunched under heavy tires. A sheriff's cruiser pulled up, headlights slicing the dusk. Karen straightened, relief flashing across her face. She smoothed her blouse, plastered on a look of false concern. Finally, she whispered, "Now we'll see who's in charge." The deputy stepped out. He was tall, mid-40s, with a lined face and tired eyes. His hand hovered near his holster, instinct born of too many tense calls. He scanned the scene, the furious white woman, the calm black man on the porch, and his jaw tightened. "Evening," he said carefully. "Someone want to tell me what's going on here?" Karen rushed forward, words tumbling out. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is trespassing in our community. He refuses to leave. I'm afraid for my safety." The deputy's gaze shifted to Derek. "Sir, you want to explain?" Derek met his eyes, steady and unshaken. "This is my family's cabin. My grandfather built it decades ago. I'm not trespassing." Karen gasped. "Lies. All lies." She shoved her clipboard toward the deputy, pages flapping. "I have whole records right here. Proof. Proof that no one named Marshall is on our resident list." The deputy took the papers, but didn't look at them yet. His eyes stayed on Derek, measuring him. Something about Derek's stillness, his calm, his refusal to flinch, made the officer hesitate. But the tension was heavy now, thick as smoke. Neighbors were gathering. Phones were out, recording. Karen's voice rang shrill across the water. And Derek? He knew the truth sat in his truck, locked in the glove compartment. Deeds, trust papers, legal records going back generations. Papers that could silence every accusation, every insult. Papers that proved Karen's hoe didn't own a single grain of sand under their shiny homes. Because Derek Marshall wasn't just defending a cabin. He owned the very land under her feet. And he was about to remind everyone. The deputy stood in the fading light, clipboard in hand, shifting his weight like a man caught between two fires. On one side, Karen buzzed with righteous fury, her words tumbling over each other as she insisted Derek had no right to be here. On the other side, Derek sat like a stone, unshaken, though inside he felt the weight of history pressing down. "Sir," the deputy said finally, "I'm gonna need to see some ID." Derek nodded. Slow, calm. He stood, reaching carefully into his pocket. "It's in my wallet." "Back right pocket. I'll move slow." The deputy gave a short nod, signaling he understood. Tension hummed in the air, neighbors whispering, phones recording. Karen's breath sharp and quick as she muttered, "Finally, they'll take him away." Derek handed over his license. The deputy glanced at it, then at him. "Marshall?" "Huh. Yes, sir," Derek said, his voice even. "Marshall. My grandfather built this cabin." Karen scoffed. "Officer, don't be fooled. This is all a performance. Squatters come up with stories like this all the time. Next, he'll tell you he owns the lake too." The words hung there, ridiculous and dismissive. But Derek's lips curled into the faintest smile. Own the lake? Close enough, he thought. As the deputy turned toward his cruiser to run the ID, Derek's eyes wandered to the water, shimmering in twilight. Memories rose up, warm, vivid. He was 8 years old, barefoot on this very porch, when his grandfather Henry Marshall leaned back in a rocking chair and told him the story of the land. "See that tree line?" Henry had said, pointing toward the ridge. "That's where I started. Bought it for pennies because nobody wanted swamp. But I knew better. I drained it, cleared it, planted pine, laid the foundation for this cabin with my own hands." Henry's hands were thick and scarred, living proof of work that turned mud into legacy. "Don't you forget, boy," he'd said. "When folks see you here, some won't believe it's yours. They'll tell you to leave. They'll look you dead in the eye and call you an outsider on your own ground. But this land, this lake, it remembers who worked it. It remembers us." Those words stayed with Derek his whole life. And now, here it was, the moment his grandfather had warned him about. The deputy came back, handing Derek's ID over. "Your license checks out." But he glanced at Karen, who was vibrating with impatience. "Thing is, HOA records don't list you as a resident." Karen pounced. "Exactly. That's because he doesn't belong here. Officer, this is an open and shut case." Derek let out a long breath, then stepped down from the porch. He kept his voice measured, but there was an edge to it now. "Ma'am, you keep talking about HOA records like they're gospel. But the truth is, your HOA doesn't outrank property deeds. And the deeds on this land, they don't trace back to you." Karen blinked. "Excuse me? They trace back to me," Derek continued. "To my grandfather, Henry Marshall. Every house in this county, every dock, every plot along this lake, leased, sold, or parceled out by my family. I'm not trespassing. I'm standing on ground my grandfather bought and worked when folks like you wouldn't give it a second look." The crowd of neighbors shifted uneasily. Whispers rippled. The deputy's brow furrowed. Karen laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "You expect us to believe that fairy tale? I don't need you to believe me," Derek said. "I've got paperwork, deeds, records going back 70 years. Sitting in my truck right now." The deputy scratched his chin. "If that's true, sir, showing that paperwork would settle things real quick." But Derek didn't move just yet. Instead, he looked at the neighbors gathered, faces half curious, half skeptical, some already raising phones hired to catch every word. He wanted them to hear it, to understand. "You see," Derek said, raising his voice just enough to carry, "people forget. They see new homes, new fences, HOAs popping up with their rules and bylaws, and they think history disappears. But history doesn't vanish. It's written into the dirt, into the deeds. My family's sweat built this place, and no clipboard is going to erase that." The words landed heavy. One older man in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, whispering to his wife. A young couple frowned, as if trying to piece together the story behind the land their house stood on. Karen, though, doubled down. "Officer, this is ridiculous. He's just trying to intimidate us with some old family story. I demand you remove him immediately." The deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, calm down. If he's got paperwork, we'll check it. That's how the law works." Karen's eyes blazed. "The law? The law is the whole covenant. We have the right to control what happens in our community." Derek finally stepped toward his truck, the gravel crunching under his boots. He opened the door, pulled out a thick leather folder, and walked back slowly. His movements were deliberate, calm, controlled. He laid the folder on the porch rail, flipped it open, and spread out yellow deeds and crisp legal documents. "Here," he said, his tone sharp now. "You want proof? This is the Marshall Family Trust. This cabin sits on land my grandfather purchased in 1954. And that's not all. Every property in this development, built on land leased or sold from the trust. Which means, ma'am," he locked eyes with Karen, "your shiny hoe doesn't own me. In fact, it exists because my family allowed it to." The silence that followed was electric. The deputy leaned over the papers, his eyes scanning the seals, the notary stamps, the signatures. His lips pressed into a thin line as realization settled in. Karen sputtered. No, this is fake. It has to be fake." The deputy looked up at her, tired now. "These look pretty official to me, ma'am." The crowd murmured louder, shock rippling outward. A teenager in the back whispered, "Wait, he owns the whole lake?" Derek didn't answer. He just stood there, shoulders square, letting the weight of the truth sink in. Karen's face flushed red, then white. Her grip tightened on the clipboard until her knuckles showed. And though she didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning. Because Derek hadn't come here looking for a fight. But now that one had landed at his doorstep, he was ready to see it through. For a long moment, the lakeside was silent except for the ripple of water against the docks. Neighbors hovered on porches, whispering. Phones stayed raised, capturing every second. Karen's jaw worked furiously as she tried to form words. But all that came out was a strangled laugh. This is absurd. You really expect us to believe some dusty old papers give you the right to just squat here? Derek's eyes narrowed. Squat? Ma'am, those dusty papers are called deeds. They don't expire just because you don't like who's holding them. The deputy cleared his throat. Ma'am, the documents appear legitimate. Until a judge says otherwise, I can't remove him. Karen's face twisted. So you're telling me he gets to sit here, no questions asked? What kind of law enforcement is this? The deputy rubbed his temples. The kind that deals with facts, not feelings. Gasps and chuckles rippled through the crowd. A couple of neighbors actually nodded. But Karen wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The next morning, Derek woke to the low growl of an engine outside. He stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand, and spotted a black SUV idling at the end of the gravel path. Out climbed two men in polos with whole logos embroidered on their chests. One carried a stack of papers. The other, a camcorder. Karen wasn't far behind, strutting toward the porch like she was leading an army. Mr. Marshall, she called out, voice sharp and clipped. The whole board has convened. We are here to formally notify you of multiple violations. Derek sipped his coffee. Violations? For a cabin my family built before your HOA even existed? The man with the paper stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. According to our bylaws, all properties within this jurisdiction are subject to regulations on occupancy, exterior maintenance, and approved residency. This cabin predates your bylaws by decades. Derek replied flatly. Karen snatched the papers and slapped them onto the porch rail. Refusal to comply will result in fines. Daily fines. And if you still refuse, we'll pursue legal eviction. Derek chuckled, not with humor but disbelief. Evict me? From my own land? The camcorder whirred softly as the second man zoomed in on Derek's face. We're documenting this for the record, he said. Derek leaned closer, voice low. Good. Document this. I don't answer to your HOA. You're standing on martial land, same as everyone else around this lake. You want to test that in court? Be my guest. The camcorder lowered just a fraction. The man holding it looked uneasy, but Karen only grew louder. This is harassment. He's threatening us. No, ma'am, Derek said calmly, sipping his coffee again. I'm informing you. There's a difference. Word spread fast. By afternoon, Derek noticed more neighbors gathered in clusters along the road, whispering, casting glances his way. Some looked curious, others suspicious. A few looked angry. Later, as he stacked wood by the shed, a man in a fishing cap walked up cautiously. Name's Tom, he said, scratching his beard. Been living here 8 years. Never heard anything about this land being yours. Derek wiped sweat from his brow. That's because the HOA doesn't want you to. But it's public record. County courthouse has every deed on file. My grandfather sold some parcels, leased others, but the trust kept ownership of the land itself. Ground you walk on, water you fish in, it all traces back. Tom whistled low. If that's true, you could shut the whole HOA down. Derek met his gaze. If I wanted to. Tom studied him a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Good luck. You're gonna need it. They don't let go easy. That evening, just as the sky bled orange over the lake, the deputy returned, this time with another officer. Their cruiser lights flickered briefly before shutting off. Mr. Marshall, the deputy began. We've received multiple complaints today. Noise, harassment, unauthorized occupancy. From who? Derek asked. The deputy sighed. The HOA board. Karen appeared again, as if summoned, standing tall with folded arms. You see? Even the sheriff's department is tired of your nonsense. You don't belong here. The second officer glanced at Derek, then at the cabin. Sir, do you have proof of ownership handy? Derek pulled the folder from the porch table. handing over a notarized deed. The officer examined it carefully, nodding. "This looks in order," he admitted. Karen's voice rose. "What does that mean?" "He's just allowed to stay." The deputy turned to her. "Yes, ma'am. Until a court says otherwise, he has the right." Karen's face twisted into fury. "Then we'll take it to court. We'll drag him through every hearing, every fine, until he begs to leave." Derek's patience cracked just enough for his voice to harden. "You can try, but let me give you a warning, ma'am. Every time you step foot on this land, you're stepping onto property my family still owns. Keep pushing, and I'll start charging you rent." Gasps erupted from the neighbors watching. Someone even laughed nervously. The officers exchanged a glance, half amused, half weary. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no words. But Derek knew this wasn't over. Not even close. That night, he sat alone on the porch, listening to frogs croak by the shoreline. He thought of his grandfather's warning. "They'll try to erase you, son, piece by piece. But don't you bow. Don't you run." Derek wasn't running. What Karen didn't realize was that this fight she'd picked wasn't just about a cabin. It wasn't even about an hoe. It was about history, legacy, and about who had the right to claim this land. And Derek was ready for the storm that was coming. By the third day, the lake community was buzzing like a hive. At the local diner, whispers floated from booth to booth. At the gas station, folks paused mid-pump to trade rumors. Even at the small-town church on Sunday morning, Derek's name was on everyone's lips. "Did you hear? That Marshall fella says his family owns the whole lake. They're just trying to scare the hoe. Probably a bluff." "No," my cousin at the courthouse checked. "Those deeds are real." It didn't matter where Derek went. He felt the weight of eyes on him. Some curious, some skeptical, some downright hostile. And at the center of it all stood Karen, clipboard clutched tighter than ever, spinning her version of events to anyone who'd listen. That afternoon, Derek was repairing a loose shutter on the cabin when he heard the sound of multiple engines. He turned to see a convoy of cars pulling up the gravel road, SUVs, sedans, even a golf cart loaded with papers. Out stepped Karen, flanked by half a dozen whole board members. Their faces were stern, their steps coordinated, as if this were a battlefield, and she their general. "Mr. Marshall," Karen's voice cut sharp through the humid air. "We have convened an emergency board meeting, and we are here to serve you with official notice." Derek set down his hammer and crossed his arms. "Notice of what?" A tall man in khakis cleared his throat and unrolled a document. "The whole board, under Covenant Section 4, Subsection 7, hereby declares your occupancy of this cabin to be unlawful. You are ordered to vacate within 72 hours or face escalating fines and legal action." Karen smiled smugly, as if the words themselves were a knockout punch. Neighbors gathered nearby, drawn by the drama. Phones went up, cameras clicked. Derek didn't flinch. He reached for the folder sitting on the porch rail, opened it slowly, and laid a thick stack of documents across the hood of Karen's SUV. "Funny thing about your notice," he said calmly. "It only holds weight if you own the land, which you don't." The board members exchanged uneasy looks. Karen's face twitched, but she pressed on. "We represent the community. We enforce the rules here." Derek tapped the papers. "And I represent the Marshall Family Trust, which means, legally, you're standing on land we still control. That whole covenant you're so proud of? It only exists because my grandfather allowed developers to lease parcels decades ago. The land underneath? Still ours." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's voice sharpened. "You're bluffing. You can't possibly own all of this." Derek's eyes locked on hers. "Not bluffing. And if you want proof, here's a little surprise for you." He pulled out a letterhead document stamped with the county seal. "As trustee, I can dissolve any arrangement tied to Marshall land at my discretion. That includes revoking access to the lake itself. Meaning," he spread his hands wide, "if I choose, I can shut down every private dock on this shoreline tomorrow." The board members froze. Karen's smug smile faltered. A murmur swept through the onlookers. Wait, he can take the docks? Someone whispered. Another muttered. We just built ours last year. Karen's eyes blazed. You wouldn't dare. Derek leaned in, voice low and steady. Try me. For the first time, Karen's certainty wavered. She glanced at her fellow board members, seeking backup. But instead of nodding, they shifted uncomfortably, sweat glistening in the heat. One man actually stepped back. Derek straightened, speaking louder now so the entire crowd could hear. You think this is just about me wanting to stay in my cabin, but it's bigger than that. My grandfather bought this land when nobody else wanted it, when banks wouldn't lend to black families, when developers laughed in his face. He worked it, drained it, built on it. And now, decades later, you want to erase that history with a clipboard and a set of bylaws? The crowd hushed. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. I'm not going anywhere, Derek said firmly. And the more you push, the more I'll push back. If that means reminding this whole county who really owns this ground, so be it. The words hit like a thunderclap. One of the board members, an older woman with gray hair, stepped forward hesitantly. Karen, maybe we should talk this over. If what he's saying is true, Karen whirled on her. Don't you dare take his side. He's lying to intimidate us. But doubt was already spreading through the board. Neighbors whispered, weighing the risks. A man muttered, what if he really can revoke lake access? Another whispered back, that would tank property values overnight. Derek could see it, the cracks forming. Karen, though, wasn't ready to surrender. She jabbed a finger at him. You think you can scare us with stories and paperwork? We'll fight you in court. We'll bankrupt you with fees. We'll bury you in so much red tape you'll wish you never came back here. Derek let out a low laugh. Karen, you still don't get it. You can't bankrupt someone who owns the very ground you're standing on. You can't bury me. I am the foundation. The words struck hard, echoing across the lake. At that moment, a new voice joined the fray. Actually, the deputy called out as he walked up from his cruiser. I checked with the county clerk this morning. Mr. Marshall's claims hold water. This trust he keeps talking about? It's real, and it's ironclad. All eyes swung toward him. Karen sputtered. That can't be. The deputy shrugged. It is. I've seen the records myself. And if I were you, ma'am, I'd tread carefully. You're picking a fight you can't win. The crowd gasped. Phones caught every second. Karen's face turned crimson. Her clipboard slipped from her grip and landed in the gravel with a dull thud. For the first time since this began, she looked small. But Derek didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just gathered his papers, slid them back into the folder, and said quietly, this isn't about beating you, Karen. It's about reminding everyone that history doesn't vanish just because you ignore it. My grandfather's legacy lives here, and I'll protect it with everything I've got. The neighbors watched in silence as Karen bent to snatch up her clipboard, her hands trembling. For the first time, the power dynamic had shifted. Karen had walked up certain she could bully Derek into submission, but instead, she walked away knowing he could dismantle everything she thought she controlled. And that was only the beginning. After that explosive showdown on the gravel road, the lake community could feel the air shift. What had started as a petty host squabble was morphing into something bigger, something that cut deeper than bylaws and lawn measurements. Neighbors couldn't stop talking. At the bait shop, conversations paused when Derek walked in. At the post office, people craned their necks to catch a glimpse of him. To some, he was a hero standing up to an overreaching hoe. To others, he was a threat to their investments, their carefully manicured dream homes, their fragile sense of control. And Karen? She wasn't retreating, not even close. Late that evening, as the sun dipped behind the pines and painted the lake gold, Derek sat on the porch of the cabin with a glass of iced tea. The cicadas buzzed, and frogs croaked near the shoreline. He finally allowed himself a moment of quiet, but the crunch of tires on gravel broke the calm. Headlights flickered through the trees. Derek set his glass down and stood, wary. A pickup truck rolled up, and out stepped a tall man in overalls with weathered hands. Behind him came a younger woman carrying a folder. Mr. Marshall? The man called, voice deep but respectful. Depends on who's asking, Derek replied cautiously. The man took off his cap. Name's Henry Collins. My family's farmed the South Ridge for 3 generations. This here's my daughter, Tessa. We wanted to talk. Derek gestured to the porch. All right, talk. They climbed the steps. Tessa opened the folder, pulling out a stack of photographs. Black and white, faded, but powerful. These were taken back in the 1940s, she explained. Your grandfather and mine used to trade goods. See here? That's him helping build our barn after a storm. Derek leaned closer, eyes narrowing as he studied the faces in the pictures. His grandfather, younger, strong and determined, stood beside Henry's grandfather. Henry spoke softly. The HOA's been squeezing folks like us too. They've tried to fine me for parking my tractor out front, for keeping chickens, for things that have been part of this land long before any covenants existed. Truth is, Mr. Marshall, you standing up to them gives the rest of us hope. Derek felt something stir in his chest. He wasn't alone. The next morning, more visitors came. An older couple from across the lake brought up high and quietly offered their support. A group of younger families, tired of Karen's endless rulemaking, asked Derek what he planned to do. Even a retired sheriff stopped by, muttering, I never liked the way she ran that board. Always thought she acted above her pay grade. Within days, Derek realized something remarkable. Karen's iron grip on the hoe was slipping, and every person who came forward only widened the cracks. Still, the pressure was immense. Karen doubled her efforts, calling emergency meetings, drafting petitions, even trying to rally outsiders with threats of declining property values. She painted Derek as the villain, a lawless squatter determined to destroy their peaceful community. And yet, the more she fought, the more desperate she looked. One evening, as thunder rolled in the distance and rain pattered softly on the tin roof, Derek sat with Tessa, Henry, and a few allies in the cabin. They spread out papers across the table, deeds, maps, HOA bylaws. Tessa tapped a paragraph. Here, Covenant Section 5. It explicitly states that HOA authority ends at the property boundary, meaning if the land is still under Marshall Trust control, they can't enforce squat. Henry grunted. So the board's been bluffing this whole time? Derek shook his head. Not bluffing, just assuming nobody would call them on it. My grandfather always said, power's a funny thing. It lasts only as long as people believe in it. The group nodded, the storm outside punctuating his words. Then Henry leaned forward, voice low. Word is, Karen's planning something big. She's been talking about bringing in county inspectors, maybe even state officials, to pressure you. If she can't beat you with a hoe, she'll try to drown you in bureaucracy. Derek exhaled slowly. Let her try. I've got something she doesn't, truth, and a stack of receipts dating back almost a century. Still, he knew this wasn't just about paperwork. It was about perception, about dignity, about history. Tessa looked at him intently. Derek, people are watching. They're choosing sides. You could do more than just defend this cabin. You could expose the way she's been running things, the way the HOA's bullied people for years. Her words lingered. Expose. The next day, Derek acted. He walked into the county recorder's office with a flash drive full of scanned deeds, letters, and family records. He handed them over for verification, making sure everything was backed up in public files. Then he did something bold. He called a community meeting at the Lakeside Pavilion. When the day arrived, the place was packed. Families sat in folding chairs. Kids chased each other along the shoreline. The tension was thick, but curiosity drew them all. Derek stood at the front, microphone in hand, a large map unfurled behind him. My name is Derek Marshall, he began, his voice carrying across the water. Some of you know me, some of you don't. But what you need to know is this. My family built this land. We drained the swamps, laid the foundations, and for decades, we were pushed aside, our history ignored. That ends today. Karen was there, of course, standing stiffly with her clipboard. whispering furiously to the board members beside her. Derek continued, "I've heard the threats. I've seen the notices. And I've read every word of the covenants you cling to. But here's the truth. Those covenants only exist because my grandfather allowed them. This land has never stopped belonging to the Marshall family." Gasps rippled. Eyes darted to Karen, who shifted uneasily. "And here's what else you need to know," Derek added, holding up a folder. "I filed paperwork with the county clerk reaffirming the Marshall Trust, meaning every decision tied to this lake must now be reviewed in light of that trust. Every dock, every access point, every HOA action. It all comes back to us." The pavilion erupted with murmurs. Karen stepped forward, face red. "He's lying. This is a performance. Don't let him trick you." But her voice was drowned out by the crowd. People weren't jeering Derek. They were questioning her. A man called out, "Karen, is it true you fined my wife for planting a vegetable garden?" Another shouted, "Why'd you threaten to tow my truck when I was unloading firewood?" Voices rose, one after another, grievances pouring out like floodwaters. Karen tried to regain control, but the tide had shifted. Derek let the voices roll, then raised his hand for quiet. "This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. We all came here for peace, for community. But peace doesn't come from fear and fines. It comes from remembering who we are and where we came from." The crowd hushed, listening. "And if anyone doubts me," Derek said firmly, "the county clerk will confirm everything I've just told you." For the first time, Karen looked cornered, truly cornered. Her grip on the community had cracked. The board members avoided her gaze. Families she once controlled with petty rules now stared at her with suspicion, even anger. And Derek? He stood taller than ever, not just defending his grandfather's cabin, but reshaping the balance of power in the entire county. The storm was coming. Everyone could feel it. And the next clash wouldn't just decide whether Derek kept his cabin. It would decide who really controlled the lake. The night after the pavilion meeting, tension hung over the lake like humidity before a storm. Folks couldn't sleep. Porch lights burned late into the night. And in Karen's pristine cul-de-sac, the whole board gathered in secret. Her voice cut through the stillness, shrill and unrelenting. "We can't let him win. If Derek takes control of the lake, our property values will plummet. Our authority will vanish. And everything we've built here will be gone." One board member shifted nervously. "But Karen, what if he's right? What if the trust really does own the land?" The deputy confirmed it. The county clerk confirmed it. Fighting him in court would bankrupt us all. Karen slammed her clipboard down on the table. "I don't care. He doesn't belong here. He's not one of us. And I won't let him rewrite the rules. We'll hit him harder. We'll bring in reinforcements." Her eyes gleamed with a kind of desperation that scared even her allies. The next morning, Derek was awakened by the sound of heavy vehicles rumbling up the gravel road. He stepped onto the porch, mug of coffee in hand, and froze. 4 county code enforcement trucks pulled up. Behind them came 2 sheriff's cruisers, lights flashing. And at the center of it all was Karen, strutting like a general leading an army. Neighbors emerged from their homes, phones already in hand. The showdown everyone had been waiting for was here. One of the inspectors approached Derek. "Sir, we've received complaints about unpermitted construction, unsafe structures, and possible environmental violations on this property. We're here to conduct a full inspection." Derek crossed his arms. "Funny, this cabin's been standing since the 1930s. What exactly is unsafe about 80 years of history?" Karen piped up. "It's dangerous, an eyesore, a violation of our standards. Tear it down." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The inspectors shifted uncomfortably. They hadn't signed up to be Karen's wrecking crew. Derek walked calmly down the steps, folder in hand. He laid out the papers on the hood of the nearest truck. "Before you step 1 foot inside this cabin, you need to understand something. This land is held in trust under my family's name. Legally, that makes your jurisdiction here very limited. And as of yesterday, the county clerk filed an affirmation of that trust, meaning any inspection or enforcement must go through me." The lead inspector blinked. "Is that true?" Before Derek could answer, a voice called out from the crowd. It was the deputy, the same one who'd verified the trust days earlier. "It's true," he said firmly. "I've seen the documents myself. If you move on this without the trustees' consent, you'll be opening the county to a lawsuit it cannot win." The inspectors froze. One quietly closed his clipboard. Another muttered, "We're not touching this." Karen's face went crimson. "What are you doing? You have to shut him down." But the officials were already backing off, murmuring excuses, climbing back into their vehicles. The sheriff's deputies nodded politely to Derek, then returned to their cruisers. One by one, the engines roared back to life, the convoy rolled away. And just like that, Karen's last weapon vanished. The crowd erupted, some laughing, some cheering, some just shaking their heads in disbelief. Phones recorded every second, live streams buzzing across social media. Derek didn't gloat. He simply turned to Karen and said, loud enough for all to hear, "This is what happens when you mistake control for ownership. You never owned me. You never owned this land." And today, everybody saw it. Karen stood frozen, her clipboard trembling in her hands. But the humiliation wasn't done yet. Because at that moment, Henry Collins stepped forward from the crowd, holding a folder of his own. "Since we're clearing the air, I've got something to share too. Karen, we've had enough of your so-called leadership. We've drafted a petition, signed by more than half the community, to remove you as HOA president effective immediately." He handed the petition to a board member who read it silently, then nodded grimly. "Looks legitimate." Gasps again. Murmurs rippled. Neighbors looked at one another, some smiling for the first time in weeks. Karen's face twisted in shock. You can't do this to me." Derek met her gaze. "Karen, you did this to yourself." The board huddled quickly. Within minutes, the announcement came. Karen was officially removed as HOA president, pending a full community vote. The pavilion, the street, the entire Lakeside community erupted into applause. Some people hugged. Others shouted in relief. A few even wept. Karen's eyes darted wildly, searching for support. But the allies who once clung to her power now avoided her gaze. She dropped her clipboard into the dirt. For the first time since this began, she looked truly defeated. Derek stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "This land has a long memory. My grandfather poured his sweat into it. My father carried it forward. And I'll be damned if I let anyone erase that legacy. You called the cops on me, Karen. You tried to take my home. But in the end, you lost everything you thought you controlled." Karen's lips trembled. She turned and stormed off, her footsteps crunching angrily on the gravel. But her reign was over. Everyone knew it. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the lake in warm light. Neighbors lingered, shaking Derek's hand, thanking him for standing up not just for himself, but for everyone who'd been bullied into silence. Tessa leaned close and whispered, "You didn't just save your cabin, Derek. You saved this whole community." Henry added, "And you reminded us of something important. That land, history, and dignity matter more than clipboards and bylaws." Derek looked out over the lake, the water shimmering like glass. For the first time since he'd returned, he felt not just the weight of his grandfather's legacy, but its power too. That night, as the stars reflected off the still water and crickets sang in the trees, Derek sat alone on the porch. He could hear distant laughter from neighbors, the kind of joy that comes when fear is finally lifted. He thought of his grandfather, how the old man had built this place with his bare hands, knowing one day it would matter. And Derek whispered into the night, "We did it, Pops. We took it back." The climax had come and gone. Karen was dethroned. The HOA's power was shattered. But as Derek knew all too well, victory was only the beginning. The real work, the rebuilding, the healing, the legacy was still ahead. The morning after Karen's removal, the lake felt different, quieter, lighter. For the first time in months, neighbors strolled along the shoreline without glancing nervously over their shoulders. Children laughed freely, skipping stones into the water without fear of being scolded for disturbing the peace. Even the birds seemed louder, as if the land itself was exhaling relief. Derek woke early, as he always did, sipping coffee on the porch while the mist rose off the lake. His grandfather's cabin looked worn but proud, paint chipped, shutters crooked, roof patched a dozen times. To Derek, it had never looked more beautiful. He watched as a group of neighbors walked by, and, this time, waved. Not cautiously, not with suspicion, but warmly. A few even stopped to thank him. One older man chuckled. "Never thought I'd see Karen knock down a peg. You did what the rest of us only dreamed of." Derek just nodded, replying softly, "It wasn't just me. It was all of us finally standing together." But while most of the community was relieved, not everyone was celebrating. A handful of Karen's loyalists huddled at the diner later that day, whispering angrily over coffee. "She was protecting us," one woman hissed. "Protecting? More like controlling," another shot back. "No, don't you see? Now we've got him running things. What if he really does revoke our docks? What if he ruins property values?" The tension was clear. Karen might have lost her title, but her influence wasn't gone. Some still feared Derek's power, painting him as a hidden threat. And Karen herself? She wasn't finished. That evening, Derek spotted her at the far end of the lake, standing alone on her dock. Her shoulders were slumped, her clipboard nowhere in sight. For the first time, she looked small, almost fragile. But when she turned and noticed Derek watching, her eyes hardened again. She didn't shout, didn't march over, just gave him a look that promised she wasn't done. Then she disappeared into her pristine, over-decorated house. Derek sighed. He knew better than to assume the battle was fully over. People like Karen didn't fade quietly. The next few days brought a wave of changes. The whole board, now leaderless, called for a special election. For the first time, the community buzzed with genuine debate. Instead of rubber-stamping Karen's decisions, neighbors began asking hard questions. What do we actually want from this association? Do we need fewer rules, not more? Should we focus on building community instead of enforcing control? Henry Collins nominated himself for president, promising a fairer, more balanced approach. A younger couple suggested Tessa for secretary, citing her sharp eye for details and her ability to listen. And though Derek didn't run, his presence loomed large. Every candidate knew they needed his support, or at least his neutrality. Meanwhile, Derek's own role began to change. People came to him not just for help with Karen, but for advice. A single mother asked if she could plant vegetables without fear of fines. An elderly veteran asked if he could keep his American flag up year-round. Families asked about fishing rights, dock access, and community events. Derek realized something. Whether he wanted it or not, he had become the de facto guardian of the lake. Tessa noticed too. "You're more than a landowner now, Derek. You're a leader." He shook his head. "I didn't come back here to lead. I came back to honor my grandfather, to protect what he built." "Sometimes," she said gently, "those are the same thing." But leadership came with weight, and with weight came pushback. A few anonymous notes appeared in Derek's mailbox. "Don't think you can control us. We don't need another tyrant. Watch your back." The words didn't scare him, but they reminded him the fight wasn't over. Still, for every angry note, there were 10 acts of kindness. Fresh baked bread left on his porch, handshakes at the store, neighbors stopping to tell him they felt freer, safer, more at home now. The balance was shifting, slowly, steadily. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in streaks of pink and orange, Derek hosted a small gathering on his porch. Henry, Tessa, the retired sheriff, and a handful of others sat around, sharing food and stories. The air was warm, filled with laughter and the smell of grilled corn. For the first time, the cabin felt alive again, like the heart of the community it once was. Henry raised his glass. "To Derek Marshall, for reminding us what this place really stands for." Everyone echoed the toast. Derek raised his own glass, humbled. "To my grandfather," he said softly, "and to building something better than what we had before." The group cheered. Yet, even in that moment of joy, Derek's mind turned to Karen. He remembered her look on the dock, that burning resentment. He knew her type. She wouldn't vanish. She'd regroup, wait, and look for another angle. And in the back of his mind, he wondered, what would she try next? 2 days later, his question was answered. A notice arrived in the mail, stamped with an unfamiliar law firm's logo. Notice of intent to file suit. It read, Karen had hired attorneys. She was suing Derek for interference with HOA governance, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and damages to community property values. Derek chuckled bitterly. She just doesn't quit. He held the letter up to the light, then set it down on the table. The weight of the next battle pressed on him. But he wasn't afraid, because now he wasn't standing alone. That night, Derek sat by the water, the moon casting silver ripples across the lake. He could hear neighbors laughing in the distance, their joy carrying on the breeze. He thought again of his grandfather, the stubborn pride, the quiet dignity, the refusal to bow to anyone who tried to strip him of his worth. Derek whispered, I won't bow either. Not now. Not ever. The fight wasn't over, but it was different now. He wasn't just defending a cabin anymore. He was defending a legacy, a community, and the future of the lake itself. And he was ready. The lawsuit papers sat on Derek's kitchen table for days. Each time he walked by, he half expected the words to rearrange themselves into something less absurd. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. He let out a dry laugh every time he read it. Karen, of all people, claiming to be the victim. It would have been comical if it weren't so exhausting. Still, he didn't let the looming court date consume him. Derek had other responsibilities now. The lake community was shifting, and people looked to him as though he had all the answers. He didn't, but he knew one thing. Progress came not from lawsuits or power plays, but from neighbors looking out for each other. The first sign of real change came one Saturday morning when Derek spotted a group of kids painting over the graffiti on the old boathouse. A year ago, Karen would have fined their parents for unauthorized alterations to community property. But now, parents stood nearby, handing out lemonade, laughing, and pitching in. Tessa approached with a brush in hand, streaks of blue paint across her cheek. See? This is what it should have been all along. Not punishment, not fear, just pride in where we live. Derek smiled. Your grandfather would have liked this, she added softly. He felt a lump in his throat. Yeah, he would have. Henry, meanwhile, took his campaign for HOA president seriously. Not with bluster, but with humility. He held informal gatherings at the diner, listened to concerns, and promised transparency. The board should serve the people, not control them, he told the group. One night, he knocked on Derek's cabin door. I want your blessing, Henry said, almost sheepishly. You don't need my blessing, Derek replied. Maybe not, but the truth is, people see you as the real authority around here. If you don't back me, some will think I'm just another puppet. Derek studied him. Henry wasn't perfect, but he had courage, the kind Karen never respected. Finally, Derek extended his hand. You've got my support. Just don't become what we just tore down. Henry clasped his hand firmly. You have my word. Not all wounds healed quickly, though. At the grocery store one afternoon, Derek overheard two women whispering. He acts like he owns the place. Well, doesn't he? That cabin's his excuse to boss everyone around. Derek walked past without reacting, but the words stuck with him. He didn't want to be Karen's mirror image. He wanted freedom, for himself, and for everyone. The balance between leadership and control was delicate, and he felt the weight of it every day. Then came the night of the storm. As summer thunder had rolled across the lake, the wind lashing the water into frothing waves. Lightning split the sky, followed by deep, rolling thunder. Derek was securing his porch furniture when he spotted lights bobbing on the water. A boat, too small, too far out, and clearly in trouble. He didn't think, he just acted. Sprinting to the dock, he untied his grandfather's old fishing boat and powered the motor to life. Rain pelted his face as he pushed into the waves. Two teenagers clung to the side of their overturned kayak, pale and shivering. "Hang on," Derek shouted, pulling alongside them. With careful strength, he hauled them aboard, wrapping them in the spare tarp. When they reached shore, neighbors rushed to help. The boys' parents wept with relief, hugging Derek, thanking him over and over. Word spread fast. By morning, everyone knew who had saved the kids. The whispers of doubt softened. Derek wasn't just a symbol anymore. He was a protector. Karen, however, saw things differently. The very next day, Derek received a letter slipped under his door. No envelope, no signature, just one line in tight, angry handwriting. "Heroes fall the hardest." Derek held it for a long time. He wasn't afraid, but he knew the game was escalating. Karen had lost power in the HOA, but she was using every tool she had left: lawyers, intimidation, and fear. Despite her looming shadow, life continued. And it was in those ordinary moments that true healing bloomed. The single mother planted her vegetable garden, and instead of citations, neighbors offered compost and tools. The elderly veteran kept his flag up year-round, and every morning children saluted it on their way to the bus stop. The diner, once a place of gossip and division, became a hub of laughter and planning. Fishing tournaments, potlucks, and even a fall festival. Bit by bit, the lake began to feel less like Karen's kingdom and more like home. One evening, Tessa and Derek walked the shoreline together. The air was cool, fireflies blinking in the tall grass. "Do you ever regret coming back?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "I regret how ugly it had to get. But no, I don't regret standing my ground. This cabin, this lake, it's in my blood." Tessa stopped, facing him. "It's in mine too. And you've made it safe again, for all of us." They stood in silence, the lake stretching out before them, calm and shimmering under the moonlight. For the first time in a long while, Derek felt peace, but he knew it wouldn't last. The court summons arrived 2 weeks later, crisp and official. The date was set: Karen versus Derek. Neighbors gathered at his cabin, offering advice and support. Some even pooled money to help with legal fees. Derek was humbled, but also resolute. "This isn't just my fight anymore," he told them. "She's trying to drag us all back into her grip. If she wins, we all lose." Henry placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we make sure she doesn't." The night before the court date, Derek sat alone on the porch, staring out at the lake. The water was still, a mirror reflecting the stars. He thought of his grandfather's words, spoken years ago when Derek was just a boy learning to fish. "The lake doesn't belong to you, son. You belong to it. Respect it, protect it, and it'll carry you through anything." Derek whispered into the quiet, "I won't let her take this from us. Not now. Not ever." The wind rustled through the trees, almost as if the lake itself answered. Tomorrow would be another battle, but he was ready. The courthouse stood like a gray monolith on the edge of town, its stone walls weathered by time, but no less imposing. Derek climbed the steps slowly, every creak of his boots echoing in the early morning stillness. He wasn't alone. Behind him trailed a small army of neighbors, faces solemn, shoulders squared. Henry walked at his side, adjusting his tie nervously. "Feels like half the county showed up." "They did," Derek replied. His voice was steady, but inside his chest, his heart pounded like a drum. "This isn't just my case anymore. It's ours." Inside, the courtroom buzzed with low murmurs. The gallery was packed. Fishermen in faded caps, families who once feared hoe letters, even the teenagers he'd pulled from the stormy lake. They all came, not just to support Derek, but to see Karen held accountable. And then she appeared. Karen swept in with her lawyer, every inch of her body languished screaming confidence. She wore a tailored suit, pearls gleaming at her neck, her chin tilted upward as though she were entering her own kingdom. The whispers grew sharper. Some people averted their eyes. Others glared openly. Derek met her gaze. She smirked, lips curling. The judge entered,